Good day, everyone. It's JB coming to you from somewhere in the record sphere as we continue to look into the artists and music in my record collection. Well, we are rolling into the life of a Minneapolis genius, Prince Rogers Nelson, delving into his discography, seeing what's in my collection, and touching on parts of his life story connected to each of the releases. If you haven't already checked it out, please view Prince Parts 1 and 2 in my broadcasts as they take you back, way back to the beginning, up to the Parade album. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe and notification buttons to be sure to be updated on when new broadcasts drop. This episode starts in the year 1987 with the Sign of the Times album. This double album is fantastic. Prince shows nearly all of his cards here, from bare-bones electro-funk like the title song and Housequake, and smooth soul as in the Ballad of Dorothy Parker, pseudo-psychedelic pop, If I Was Your Girlfriend, crunching hard rock like the song You Got the Look, and touching on gospel, blues, and folk all along the way. But why did it spread itself in so many directions? Mostly because this release was a culmination of 3 different albums that had been synthesized down to one spectacular double album. Sign of the Times took from other concept albums that Prince had been toying with, namely Crystal Ball, Dream Factory, and Camille. The latter being a character-driven concept that sees Prince's voice at a higher, sped-up pitch, like in the song If I Was Your Girlfriend. As a side note, and yes, I did mention this in a much earlier episode when I was discussing the Jack White albums in my collection, but it bears to be mentioned again that Jack White's record company, Third Man Records, had officially announced that they had purchased the exclusive rights to release the Camille album under the Third Man Records label. But, once again, as of this broadcast, I have yet to see that culmination of that. I know that many of the songs that were to be featured on the Camille album had been spread out to other Prince albums over time, but I think Prince fans would still clamor to get at an actual Camille release. Back to the album at hand, Sign of the Times. This album marks the first release after the breakup of The Revolution, though because the album is so expansive, it does feature some songs that they had worked on or performed while they were still together, including the songs It, Starfish and Coffee, The Ballad of Dorothy Parker, I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man, Sign of the Times, Strange Relationship, The Cross, and Slow Love. Each of these songs were to be featured on the aforementioned Dream Factory album, an album that Prince was working on with The Revolution before things went sour, but ended up being featured on Sign of the Times instead. In this new phase of Prince's life and career, Prince had started working with legendary performer and drummer Sheila E. She herself states that she met Prince around 1978, backstage at one of his concerts, but it wasn't until 1983 when he asked if they could put a record together. She subsequently went on the Purple Rain tour with him, and she states they dated for a while as well. The official PaisleyPark.com site says that 1987 also marks the opening of Prince's new home and recording studio, Paisley Park. Though an earlier release of Around the World in a Day, which came out in 1985, does show that it was released under the Paisley Park record label, though I feel it could have been in name only under the Warner Brothers label, or Prince could have been recording at Paisley Park while he continued to expand his empire. Paisley Park, located in Chanhassen, Minnesota, would remain Prince's castle of sorts until his untimely death in 2016. I highly recommend taking a tour of this estate. It offers several different tour options, a regular tour, and an exclusive tour, as well as celebrations throughout the year, just as Prince would have liked. As well as the double Sign of the Times album, Prince also released a Sign of the Times concert movie. That is one of my favorite concert films of all time, though it failed to connect with movie-going audiences. Although there is a loose storyline that supposedly connects the songs together, and on a personal note, it could really do without that part, It's the energetic concert footage that is really worth watching and makes the whole thing worthwhile. Prince's next endeavor, which was to appear just a few months after the Sign album, has gained a legendary, mythological status among the Prince family. The album is the Black Album. Originally scheduled for release in November of 1987, Prince pulled the Black Album weeks before its release. Urban legends spread like wildfire. AllMusic.com states, Prince believed it was too bleak to release. Warner Brothers balked at its explicit lyrics. No CDs were ever pressed, and all the LPs were destroyed. Well, that final rumor was certainly untrue, since bootlegs immediately appeared, and when it finally received official release in the fall of 1994, nearly every diehard fan already had the record. Prince himself commented on the pulled release and said, "I was very angry a lot of the time back then, and that was reflected in the album. I suddenly realized we could die at any moment and we'd be judged by the last thing we left behind. I didn't want that angry, bitter thing to be the last thing. I learned from that album, but I don't want to go back." Although I don't own a copy of the Black Album, I've listened to it on other platforms and have several songs I like to go back to, namely Le Grind, Super Funky Califragisexy, and Cindy C., the latter song being a song he wrote about Cindy Crawford based on an experience they shared dancing together. In place of the Black Album, though, 1988 shared the Lovesexy album, a release in what some people call a hastily assembled substitute for the withdrawn Black Album. The release of Lovesexy showed yet another side of Prince. The multi-talented, multi-layered individual released an album where the compact disc didn't have index markings to separate the individual tracks, so it appeared as one long track. Lovesexy is quite a different record than not only the Black Album, but by anything else Prince had recorded. Where Dirty Mind was single-minded in its lust, Lovesexy connects the carnal with the spiritual, and the calmness of the music reflects this. Even when the record dips into funk, such as in the title track or the single Alphabet Street, there's a relaxed, casual quality to the music that is shocking after the dense paranoia of Parade, Sign of the Times, and the Black Album. With Prince's work rate at an all-time high in the late 80s, Lovesexy was recorded in under 2 months, from late December 1987 to February 1988, in Prince's recently built Paisley Park complex. Prince once stated, "I did Lovesexy in 7 weeks from start to finish, and most of it was recorded in the order it was on the record." Lovesexy was indeed an inclusive work. After welcoming listeners to the new power generation, the first time Prince actually used the soon-to-be ubiquitous phrase, album opener I Know, launched into a classic Prince party jam. Flowing straight into the slinky, bluesy funk of Alphabet Street, the album drops further clues as to Prince's epiphany, seemingly suggesting, in typically cryptic fashion, that physical love can be achieved through multiple means. One of the more controversial Prince album covers, the Lovesexy artwork, was shot by French fashion photographer Jean-Baptiste Mondino and pictured Prince replicating Botticelli's Renaissance-era painting The Birth of Venus, reclining in the nude, and a not-so-subtle background painting with a flower. Major U.S. chain stores refused to stock it, but Prince shrugged any concerns off, later telling Rolling Stone magazine, "All that album cover was a picture. If you looked at that picture and some ill came out of your mouth, that's what you are. It's looking right back at you in the mirror." Well, sexually subtle or not, the album gained the majority of its popularity in the UK, peaking at number 1 there, while it only reached a top spot of 11 in the US. The album spawned only one hit single in Alphabet Street, but failed to reach audiences with subsequent singles, Glam Slam and I Wish You Heaven. Another connection to the scrapped Black Album is that one song from the Black Album appears on Lovesexy. That is, When Two Are in Love. Prince seemed to be very fond of this song, as it appears exactly the same in each of the album versions. After the release of Lovesexy, Prince delved into the movie business once again. Not in the director's chair or in a starring role in front of the camera, but behind the scenes. Director and producer Tim Burton, mostly known for his foray into claymation classics such as Corpse Bride and The Nightmare Before Christmas, as well as quirky movies like Edward Scissorhands and such, asked Prince to work out a soundtrack in collaboration with Danny Elfman for his new Batman movie starring Michael Keaton as the Bat and Jack Nicholson as the Joker, Batman's arch-enemy. Danny Elfman refused to work with Prince, but it wasn't out of disrespect. In an interview with GQ, Danny Elfman explains,
I've never done anything harder than Batman because, first off, I had to prove myself. It's like, okay, he's the quirky comedy guy. And here I am doing like this Batman movie. Understandably, I think they were like, we need somebody who knows how to do this kind of music. But nobody knew what kind of music it was. There really was no superhero music. There was just Superman. And we said, we know we don't want it to be Superman and John Williams. And then there was an element with the producer in the studio of wanting it to be a pop score. There was definitely this moment of like, Danny, we want you to collaborate with Prince and co-write the score. And I go, I can't do that. People go, you really said that? I love Prince, but not for that score. I already knew what the score was. And I knew that if I collaborated, he'd be writing tunes and I'd be orchestrating his tunes and I would be essentially a glorified arranger rather than a composer, because he was world famous and I was still nothing. I had to walk away. I was so depressed. I felt like I just blew up my own career. And then a month later, I got the call saying, Danny, you're back on. We got to get moving. Come on, come on. And it's like, this gamble paid off, but it was a miserable period of time. On the other hand, I already heard the music in my head. I knew what it was, and I was determined that that was going to be the score.
So Danny Elfman wrote his score for the Batman movie, and Prince wrote his songs. And yeah, in my opinion, it's weird. I like Danny's score, but look, as much as I love Prince, and I love the songs he created for the movie, it doesn't work for me. I like the Batman album apart from the movie, but not with the movie. Standout songs on the Batman soundtrack for me include The Future, Lemon Crush, and Electric Chair, with Bat Dance being a nice addition. Taking audio clips from the movie and incorporating them into a dance track was and still is pretty cool. Speaking of movies, Prince entered into his final theatrical release, once again in front of the camera, with 1990's Graffiti Bridge. Now, Purple Rain may have made him a star in 1984, but it took him 6 years to revisit that world. By the time he came to film Graffiti Bridge, Prince was entering both a new decade and another significant reinvention. But while the Graffiti Bridge film may not have performed as he had hoped in the box office, its soundtrack album proved more impactful, serving as a goodbye to one era while also hinting at what lay ahead for Prince in the 90s. A collaborative album, Prince works with the likes of Tevin Campbell, George Clinton, Morris Day and the Time, Candy Dulfer, Sheila E., Mavis Staples, The Steels, and many more wonderful artists. Speaking of collaborations, although the album is noted as being a Prince album, it is also the first we hear from some members of his new band, the New Power Generation, or NPG, including Levi Saucer Jr. and Rosie Gaines. Being that Prince was such a great songwriter, many people could believe that Prince would have no problem coming up with songs to plop into this new movie, but that didn't seem to be the case. Prince wanted the best of the best, so all the songs, with the exception of Thieves in the Temple, were pulled from the vault, and had previously been written during different Prince eras, hence the mishmash of song styles. Seeing as this was meant to be a sequel to Purple Rain, it makes sense that the Graffiti Bridge soundtrack would pull from different areas of Prince's life after Purple Rain. Standout songs from Graffiti Bridge include Joy in Repetition, The Question of You, Weekend Funk, Thieves in the Temple, and Still Would Stand All Time. Collaboration must have been in the cards for Prince as he set out in his 1990 Nude Tour and ended up meeting with a fan who, by the way, didn't even want to go to the Prince concert initially, but upon meeting would become a major love and muse from that point on. More on that and other albums in the next episode. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next time, Prince fans.